Hello students, today we are going to talk to you about the rise of the middle classes in contemporary India. Now, the learning objectives of this module are to understand the middle class as a conceptual category, to also examine the historical evolution of the middle classes in India, to assess the renewed significance of the new middle classes in a globalizing society like India, and also to understand the altered character of the post-colonial Indian middle classes. Now, traditionally, in the earlier Marxist evaluations, the middle classes were regarded as impediments to the progressive march of history. It fell upon Antonio Gramsci, one of the very first scholars, an influential scholar, to highlight the importance of the middle classes in creating and maintaining the dominant ideologies that uphold the social structure in any given society. Now, the middleness of the middle class always makes it desirable for all human beings who are traditionally considered outside its ambit. But the middle class often view themselves as the stable center of society and polity, one that is impervious to the extremes. Therefore, they are considered to be a class which reflects the virtues of moderation. The middle classes, although are lesser in numerical strength, they have an invaluable importance in our society today. They often present themselves as the representatives of the most dominant and the most popular values in any society at a given point of time. And it is what comes to one's mind is that of the image of the common man, which is, it is common in the sense that it is shared, and also the fact that it is widespread. The middle class also considers itself as the most suitable group to vocalize the dominant view of the society or to act on behalf of the society as a whole. But although there are these broad similarities about the way in which the middle class is conceived as a category, the historical growth of the middle classes, its trajectory in any given society and its development has varied in different national contexts. However, the middle classes continue to remain very, very important and an integral part of the Indian social order, and this is further augmented by the fact that the middle classes are considered to be the legitimate representative of the Indian society as a whole. It has often been seen that the experience of colonialism, the existence of indigenous hierarchies and the various local histories have shaped the nature of the Indian middle classes. Let me go on to talk about how the middle classes are perceived sociologically. As far as studies on the middle classes are concerned, there have been numerous in this particular arena, but it is very difficult to provide very clear and succinct definition of the middle classes because the contours of the middle class has been shifting. Some sociologists have defined the middle classes in terms of their relation to the means of production, while others have focused on the nature of income that they have. Also, what makes it difficult to define the middle class very, very clearly is the fact that there is a diversity in the range of incomes, there is range of occupational spread as well as employment status, which are so pronounced as far as the middle classes are concerned that often a pluralistic understanding has been undertaken by researchers to make sense of the concept of the middle class itself. Sociologists have also tried to make out clear distinction between the features of the middle classes and the working classes, and one such example is by Tony Bilton, who feels that what the middle classes have is a material and a cultural advantage which demarcates them from the rest of the social order. Now, what creates difficulties is because economic, social and political definitions of the middle classes are often operationalized by the researchers who do so in relation to their concrete empirical reality or inquiry that they have undertaken. But sociologists have focused on assessing the importance of the middle classes in relation to other social classes. One of the important aspect of the middle class recognized sociologically is that the new middle classes have been emerging and expanding in the recent times. So, the new Weberian and the new Marxist schools have said that the importance of the market in shaping the life chances of the members of the social class is significant. Another approach says that there is focus on the taste, the preferences, the forms of consumption that the middle classes are said to have. In other words, the role of various political, social and economic trends nationally have shaped and reshaped the nature of our understanding regarding the middle classes. Studies on the reproduction of the middle class identity, middle class advantage, the intersectionality of caste, gender and race within the middle class identity, and also cross national comparative assessments have characterized our understanding, our sociological understanding of the trends within this particular field. Now, let me go back a little historically and talk about the emergence and importance of the colonial middle class in our country. The emergence of the colonial middle class occurred with the expansion of English education during the British times, and it is the British wanted a set of educated administrative employees to work for the colonial bureaucracy, and therefore the people who got involved in getting education, English education for themselves could be easily absorbed in this bureaucracy. Apart from that, during the colonial period, there were professionals like lawyers, doctors, teachers, journalists, etc., who became part of the middle classes. Now, the emergence of the middle classes in India during the colonial period was both a cultural and a political project, and it is through their activities in the public sphere that the middle classes have often thought of themselves as the harbingers of modernity in a country like India. Traditionally, the members of the colonial middle classes were essentially high caste Hindus, Ashraf Muslims and other high status occupants who used to work in the court of the British and who had the education and the skill to take advantage of whatever was being offered. Therefore, the growth of the 19th century middle classes marked new kind of a cultural politics. It allowed them to articulate a new set of beliefs, ideals, values, politics, which distinguished them from other social groups who were below them, who were different from them, but who nevertheless existed in Indian society. Now, it was the public sphere which was responsible for universalizing middle class norms and middle class values, and gradually the values and the mores of the colonial middle class became hegemonic in the kind of influence they wielded as in the public sphere. Now, the nationalist movement is said to have been operationalized, and it is said to be successful because of the participation, widespread participation of the colonial middle classes. In fact, so much so that in the literature we find the middle class, the colonial middle class being attributed with the epithet that they had worked for giving birth to the idea of the nation itself. As I was mentioning earlier, that it was primarily due to the labors of the middle classes that the idea of the nation was conceptualized, and because this middle class conceived of the idea of the nation, they also were at the helm of strategizing the forms of resistance against the British colonial masters. So there were many kinds of manifestations in terms of members participating in Anushilan Samiti, or members participating in the Congress, or members participating in radical nationalism. But in other words, most of these people who were active in the public sphere during the time of the national movement had middle class origins. Now, one of the ways in which the middle class also managed its own complexities was to mark out a division between the inner and the outer aspects of its own lives. That is, this division that has been oft cited is drawn from what Partha Chatterjee wrote about in terms of the division between the spiritual and the material, the inner and the outer domain, whereby the inner domain was supposed to be a sovereign arena. It was free from any kind of control by colonial domination. This is where the identity of the intelligentsia or of the people flourished, and obviously without prevarication, it is obvious to say that the concerns of gender were located in this particular arena, whereas the outer domain was that of the public sphere, which was occupied primarily by men, and it would witness the political battle between the colonizers and the colonized when the national movement was going on. Now, the colonial middle class was always a little doubtful about what kind of impact that the national movement would have on its identity. So, it drew from the Western ideals as well as from traditional cultural elements to fashion its own identity, to fashion the forms of resistance. But whatever the case was, the leadership during this period was unequivocally drawn from the middle classes. In fact, nationalism spread far and wide because the middle classes were actively involved in the dissemination of nationalistic ideas to the villages, to the margins of society, to different parts of the country. It was the middle class which was marked by the fervor of nationalism, and they could naturally take it wherever they went. The Government of India Act of 1919 helped strengthen the middle class representation in the committees and the governing bodies that were set up, and subsequently the importance of the middle class, the political clout of the middle class continued to increase with, as the national movement reached its fruition and India became independent, the importance of the middle classes continued to increase. Let me talk about the post-colonial middle classes in India now. Now, as far as the post-colonial, during the post-independence period, the middle classes represented the natural class who would be the inheritors of the progressive ideals of the national movement. Both institutionally and ideologically, the middle class succeeded its colonial predecessor, and naturally the developmental ideology of Nehru gave the middle class a kind of fillip, a kind of impetus to carry on with its commitment to notions of development, which was articulated by the Nehruvian model of growth and development. In fact, the Nehruvian model of growth postulated the need for experts, and where would this expertise come from but from the middle classes to helm the growth process that had been envisioned by Nehru. Now, this model of development and the importance of the middle classes in occupying a very important position in the bureaucracy or as experts gave a fillip to the middle classes and bestowed them a renewed significance as they contributed as the professional and technological workforce of the nation. In fact, the middle classes were a kind of a co-constitutive supportive structure they got from the development oriented state and the middle classes, and it is due to this kind of a support that the middle class flourished. But over time, as we all know, that the developmental model did not flourish the way in which it had been envisioned. So, as the fallacy of the developmental discourse became more evident, the ideology of development also came to be critiqued, it came to be undermined, and it was realized that quite a large section of people, namely the regional vernacular elite, had been left out of any kind of participation in this particular mode of development. So, as far as the middle classes is concerned, they enjoyed free reign during the Nehruvian period, but over a period of time their importance declined, in the sense that the middle classes became more differentiated. The hegemony, the relative homogeneity of the middle classes was questioned, and the importance of the middle class as a singular class, as a decisive class category, came to be challenged as multiple segments within it gained preeminence. These segments were, in the sense, along the lines of language, along the lines of gender, along the lines of exposure to private capital. So, these segments became preeminent, and therefore, the middle classes, one could witness several lines of differentiation within the middle classes. Now, the diversification of the middle classes and a decline of the old ideologies led to the emergence of many subnational identities, subnational loyalties. Subnational loyalties would refer to the loyalties marked by castes, marked by language, marked by region, as well as one part of the middle class could take advantage of transnationalism, which started as the economy opened up and allowed the highly qualified middle classes to take advantage of the transnational identities. Now, the emergency, as we all know, is a watershed moment for the middle classes, because it marked a radical shift in the focus of the middle class towards more control, towards order, towards consumerism, towards more authority. Now, after around the 1980s and also around the 1990s, which stretched on to the 1990s, the recommendations of the Mandal Commission, which expanded the entry or reservation of jobs and education of the other backward classes, as well as the adoption of a liberalization framework by the Government of India, as well as the intensification of the Hindu nationalist ideologies, changed the character of the Indian middle classes. In fact, the culmination of these three events is generally thought to be very significant, as they paved the way for the old middle class identity to give way to a new category called the new middle classes, who would now become very important as India became a more global entity, a global player, and it would fall upon the new middle classes to take advantage of the opportunities that were offered by globalization. Let me now come to the third phase, which was responsible for the importance of the new middle classes in India and the rise of these of the new middle classes, which thought that it was much more cosmopolitan than its predecessors, but it had the same kind of a dilemma, that what would make its identity authentic, what would make, while it embraced globalization and modernization in a very, very over enthusiastic manner, what would make it Indian, what would keep it firmly sort of planted in the grounds of the Indian soil. So, this kind of a ambivalence is also seen amongst the new middle classes in India. Now, the neoliberal reforms of the 1990s led to the integration of the Indian economy with the global one and allowed the new middle classes to take advantage, as I had said earlier, of the opportunities, enormous opportunities unleashed on an economy which had opened up and the new middle classes emerged as a consumerist, upwardly mobile segment of the Indian population, and they were at the locus of taking advantage of all the globalization inducing changes that one could see in the economy. The new middle classes are technically and socially more diverse than the old middle classes, because the old middle class was dominated by the upper caste, middle caste people that existed at the time of independence, but membership in the new middle classes is determined by qualifications, is determined by those who are able to take advantage of new kinds of skill sets that are required in a global economy. And membership of the new middle class is determined primarily by lifestyle, primarily by consumption patterns, by ownership of certain economic assets, and the fact that they are self-conscious about their own middle class status. So, technically the claims to the new middle class status is open to all members of all caste groups who have modern education, who do not follow traditional occupations, and who have political clout. So, what we witness among the new middle classes is a process of secularization and classicization. These two categories are mentioned by Professor D.L. Sheth, who says that all individuals who enter these social categories undergo a process of secularization and classicization, that is, which means they distance themselves from the traditional functions and the ritual roles of particular caste-based identities as they embrace the new middle class identities. And this was noticed even amongst the new Indian middle class. Now, the benefits of globalization, the benefits that have accrued to the Indian middle classes have outweighed the costs of the middle class, and therefore you have an expansion of the professional and managerial segments of the middle classes, an expansion of population, demand for being part of the new middle classes, acquiring particular kinds of skill sets, etc. And now what you witness is an all-out enthusiasm for globalization and liberalization amongst members of these class. Now, what the middle class thought, in traditional middle class thought during the time of independence, was that it could vocalize the aspirations of the larger classes, it could represent the larger classes. But today there is a significant change in the sense that the middle class now thinks of itself as the nation. It thinks of itself as embodying the nation, and as India continues in the path of globalization, as globalization deepens, the new middle classes in India will continue to take advantage of the enormous global possibilities that globalization is offering, and they will claim to be vanguards of the social, economic and political changes that the globalizing society like India is witnessing. They are a transnational class. They are willing to go beyond the nation to actualize their own aspirations, as well as become the norm for the other classes in society. Now, to conclude, let me talk about some of the main ideas. Now, we have seen in the module that the role and the character of the Indian middle classes have diversified. They have undergone a transformation, but at the same time, what we also witness is that the middle classes have been seminal to the economic growth of the Indian nation, and they have managed to retain their significance because of the growth of the market capacities unleashed due to globalization. And this, what we understand as the new middle class today, is very, very clearly marked by the consumerist consumer base that they signify, as well as they are also considered to be the legitimizers of the cultural ideologies and discourses that are accepted in Indian society as the norm. They embody these discourses. They have accepted these discourses. With technological revolution, with information and communication technological revolution, the role of this particular class is expected to become stronger and much more formidable. Though the social origins may have diversified, the middle classes show a kind of promise that they have never shown before. Thank you.